Hey folks, everything new under the sun. Hopefully the audio is okay. It seemed to be spiking for me. I turned it down a little bit. It is Friday the 17th, 2023. Happy weekend to everybody. Things are going up in flames, down in flames. I don't know what, but things are happening. I want to put this out there, and I've said it before. Please go to raptureready.com and just look at the headlines. This is raptureready.com. You can see for yourself. Just read through the headlines, and you'll see a lot of information there. Go to zerohedge.com and read through the headlines. You'll at least get half of the truth. As I've said in previous videos, you look on the left media, right media, liberal, conservative. There is narrative everywhere. There are biases everywhere. And so if you're reading both sides, you'll at least get a full picture, because the truth is usually somewhere in between. And more lately, it is shifting definitely to the conservative side that is taking the high ground and reporting the news that the left doesn't want to report. And so just reading through these headlines, there are so many things happening, folks. I cannot cover them all. But we are in the last days, and things are ramping up so much so where I hardly know what to cover anymore. Everything is shock and awe, and if everything is shock and awe, then everything is just a big muddled mess of things being on fire. Let's start off here. J.P. Morgan, this is your hedge, as bank run drains $550 billion, so $500 billion in deposits in 1 week. Bank run. So there's bank runs happening on Credit Suisse specifically. Quantitative tightening is essentially over. So the Federal Reserve was trying to quantitatively tighten, i.e. Slow the amount of money they were printing out of thin air and giving to banks and giving to people. And so quantitative tightening is over because they just gave a pile of money to people. The banks, not only Federal Reserve, but in Switzerland, the Swiss Credit Suisse, is now taking a whole bunch of bailout money from the government, and that's not enough. People are still running on Credit Suisse. Here is CNBC for the day. The markets are down. Dow Jones, we're looking at Friday going into a weekend with the markets down over the last couple of days, 400 points. Why? Well, 400 points is First Republic slide rattles Wall Street. So people are starting to panic. People are starting to realize 2008 happened and the government printed a bunch of money, and people thought, okay, they went on with their daily lives. Didn't really affect them. The government bailed them out. But this time around, people who have money in the banks are starting to realize, you know what, my money's not safe there. I need to get into maybe hard assets, maybe property, maybe gold, silver, or maybe some other, put my money in another location that is not susceptible to banks crashing and requiring, the federal government to bail them out. And so there's panic. People are pulling money out of the banks. It's a slow run at this point, although it's getting faster on Credit Suisse. And this is what happened in 1929. First, the run was slow, and as more and more people found out and woke up and realized maybe they shouldn't keep all their money in the bank, maybe they should get it out, put it under their pillow, or buy some art, or buy something that's going to appreciate in value, or at least preserve their wealth, like gold coins, silver rounds, that sort of thing. People are starting to realize that banks cannot be trusted, and there's fraudulent dealings happening. There's bad dealings. Even with all the regulations they have, your money is not necessarily safe in the bank. And the Federal Reserve and the government of the United States has effectively confirmed this by bailing out these banks. Silicon Valley Bank first, Signature, First Republic, and now Credit Suisse in Europe. And while this is happening, this headline here: Fed poised to approve quarter-point rate hike next week, despite market turmoil. And what caused Silicon Valley Bank to go down was the increase in interest rates, as startups were no longer interested in taking out more loans or borrowing more money because the interest rates were high. And that meant that the house of cards started to fall because the Ponzi scheme wasn't being filled from the bottom to pay for all the people on the top. And so it was the rate hikes that specifically caused the Silicon Valley Bank to crash, to go under. to require the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government to bail them out. But the Fed is still going to go. Why? Because the Fed has no choice. They have to increase interest rates so that when when they decide to admit that we're in a recession, they can say, okay, well, we'll start decreasing rates again, because they can't decrease rates because the rates are so low. They need to raise them up. I think it's like 5-6% to be high enough to be able to lower them to make a difference. If they only lower them 2%, that's not going to make a difference in the so-called recession. They have to lower them by 3, 4, 5 percentage points for any action to actually happen in the market, which means they can't lower it 3, 4, 5 percentage points if it's not already at 5%. Or whatever it may be. And so that's interesting, but it's explainable because Fed has no choice. They would like to stop increasing the rates, but they can't. They simply can't. This ends up being an existential threat to the United States as world hegemony, as world reserve currency, and the other countries know it. Russia and China know it. Russia and China are just biding their time, and they will biding their time. And because they know that the U.S. is going to crash financially. Every world economic system does ultimately and eventually crash. Just like the Roman Empire and the British Empire, the United States is now falling. And along with this, so of course we had the Reaper drone knocked out of the sky. Is that maybe a little bit of retaliation for this? Apparently the Reaper drone was in international waters, and whether it's Russian pilot mistake or they did it on purpose, this could be payback maybe for Nord Stream in a small manner. We haven't seen Russia really retaliate for Nord Stream or the attack on the Crimean Bridge or other things, and so this could be them hitting out at the United States in a way that doesn't foment World War III. Trigger World War III, and they did have a de-escalation call after this because it was such a significant incident. But Seymour Hersh, this is the guy that brought out that the Nord Stream pipeline was blown up effectively by the United States, is doubling down on this. Seymour Hersh told the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. that Joe Biden himself made the decision to blow up Nord Stream pipelines because he saw being a war president as giving him a better chance at re-election. So this is politics. An international oil pipeline was blown up covertly to help Joe Biden get more votes and get reelected and help the Democratic Party out. This is absolutely incredible. This is a crime. There's no other words. It is a crime. It is absolutely illegal. And will he ever be tried for it? Probably not. But this is sort of the fraud and the evilness that is at these high levels. So the world is going down. The world is getting evil. What does the Bible say about the last days? Evil will abound. Sin abounds. And the love of many grows cold, because people get cynical and they say, there's nothing here to live for anymore. No one. Everybody is evil, and the love of many waxes cold. This is a Credit Suisse. Multiple banks curb trading with Credit Suisse as deposit run, read that, bank run, continues despite the Swiss National Bank rescue. So the Swiss National Bank came out and said, you know what, we're gonna backstop everything, just like the U.S. government did for Silicon Valley. We're gonna backstop everything, nothing to fear. We're gonna ensure that all the depositors get their money, but that's not enough. The depositors say, you know what, you fooled us this time, but not again. We're gonna take our money out, even if the Swiss National Bank backstops everything, because we can't trust Credit Suisse anymore. We may have got our money this time, but maybe next time we're not going to get our money, and so there is still a bank run on Credit Suisse. So that is significant, and if this speeds up, it's going to go to other banks, and this could be the turning point where people don't trust their governments anymore, don't trust that the banks won't need another bailout, because what's stopping another bailout 3 years from now? And maybe that time there won't be a bailout, and people will lose money. People are waking up, and they're taking their money out, and they're getting out of these institutions and putting money elsewhere. That's interesting. Now, I want to read, this is Daniel chapter 7, Daniel's vision, and it's about the Antichrist in the last days. This is KJV, BibleHub.com. And it says, starting in verse 23, "Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down, and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High." Is that the blasphemy, the abomination of desolation? "And shall wear out the saints of the Most High." So this is all happening at the midpoint of the 7-year period, I believe. This is the abomination of desolation, the wearing out of the saints. And he shall think to change times and laws, and that's what I want to focus in on. Times and laws. "And they shall be given into the hand until a time and times and a dividing of times." So that's 3.5 years. "But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion to consume and to destroy it unto the end." So this Antichrist figure is going to come in and try and change laws and times. Now, one would ask, well, what does that mean? Is it that in the last days, politicians are circumventing the democratic law process? Are they getting around laws? Are they implementing things that they're not supposed to, getting around the rule of law? Certainly, Netanyahu seems to be doing that in Israel, whether you like him or not. That's what the public are accusing him of going around the institution of the Knesset and basically de facto implementing some rules around the Supreme Court. Well, and this is the idea of the bills that the presidents are able to sign and basically push through any law they want effectively. And then it requires a big move of Congress to overturn that particular move. But the Antichrist will change times and laws. He will make up his own law. And I go to this story from Zero Hedge. This is about France. France burns after Macron skips parliament vote to ram through hated pension reform. French President Macron used special constitutional powers to pass a controversial bill through the National Assembly. Without a vote, a move likely to ignite protests. Was there much of a vote on the Emergency Measures Act in Canada when Trudeau pushed it through? No. By the time it was going to vote in the Senate, the Canadian Senate, the sober second thought group that are able to look at this and say, should this happen? Is it legal? He canceled it at the time. So he started I think it was 5 days before the Senate was to vote. The Senate had to vote before 7 days were up. So he implemented the Emergency Measures Act, and 4 or 5 days he got what he wanted to do. And then in the middle of the Senate discussing the legality and getting to a vote on whether the Emergency Measures Act was legal or not, he canceled it right in the middle of discussion period. When they were discussing Emergency Measures Act, Trudeau came out and said, the Emergency Measures Act is done. We're not going to use it anymore. We're shutting it down. So the Senate never voted on it. Senate never got to say whether it was legal or not, because Trudeau knew that it was going to fail in the Senate because there's many conservatives there. So all these leaders, Biden, Trudeau, Netanyahu, Macron, they're all doing things that are outside of the laws, outside of democratic process. And it may be that the democratic process doesn't work anymore anyway, so maybe they have to do things, or at least feel they have to do things to circumvent, voting. But this is happening again in Canada, where they tried to push through a gun law that banned basically a lot of hunting rifles. They tried to, they snuck some caveats into the bill behind the scenes, and after it was voted on by the parliamentarians. So these governments are circumventing the process. What will the Antichrist do? He will circumvent the process. He will simply, by move of the president's station or whatever ability he has, he will push through changes to laws. And you and I won't be able to do anything. But at that point, effectively, we're in a dictatorship. This is what President Xi of China does. This is what the leader of North Korea does, Kim Jong-un. He simply makes rules up when he wants to, and nobody votes on these. These are not democratically elected people in those communist countries. Supposedly they are in Canada and the US and France. But even if they're elected democratically, although there's Chinese interference in Canadian elections, probably in American elections too, they're still getting these laws passed. They're still finding ways around it, and there's fraudulent and criminal activity, and lots of money. Follow the money. A lot of things happening. So this guy Macron, I'm just saying, just watch him. He's an interesting character. I'm not saying he is, but he is. All these politicians will try and circumvent law, and we know ultimately that the Antichrist will do that. He will change times and laws to get what he wants, to get total and complete control of the citizens of the world, to do what he wants. And ultimately, he wants to be God, this person who will be the Antichrist and possessed by the devil himself, wants to be God, and he will sit on the throne as God in the third temple, the Bible says. And then the wrath will come, because that's the final straw. When the abomination of desolation happens, when the blaspheming happens, that's when God says, that's it. That's his red line. The blaspheming and the abomination of desolation on the throne, calling himself God in the third temple. So interesting times we live in, and I think we see the politicians and the governments of the world doing exactly what the Bible describes the Antichrist will be doing. So apparently it will be a common thing when the Antichrist comes that people will be doing this, and no one's standing up to him. He changes times and laws, and I don't read that the people of the world can stand up to it or do stand up to it. Most people accept the mark because they have no other choice. They just want to live fat, dumb, and happy, and they don't. At the end of the day, they don't think they can do anything about the politicians, and maybe we can't, because sin abounds in this world. There is evil abounding in this world. And think about how much evil and greed there is related to the stock markets. And you know what? All these smart people who are making all this money off the banks, they're going to get out before all the blue collar folks, you and I, can get out. They have lots of money, so if they lose $100,000, they don't care. So they're going to be getting out of this with lots of money at the end. And who is the money going to be taken from? You and I, who owe money on mortgages and have cash in the bank and owe lots of things and don't have millions of dollars to stow away. So folks, we're living in the last days. Time's getting shorter. We're getting, any day now could be economic collapse. And I think ultimately the economy will collapse when World War III starts. When the U.S. fires the first weapon with U.S. troops against Russia, and that World War III is triggered, it's at that moment that the economy will absolutely collapse, and that will be game over. But then it will be martial law. Then it will be military-controlled citizens, countries, because we'll all go into martial law. It'll be Emergency Measures Act, just like we already tested and practiced. It was all a practice run for the Canadian government to implement Emergency Measures Act and martial law. They'll be able to freeze our accounts if we're not doing something the government says is correct. And so this is all practice. We're all practiced up, folks. We're all practiced for a pandemic. We're all practiced up for World War III, locking down of the government and martial law. Read your Bibles, folks. It's all there. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.